What is standard costing and how does that relate to managerial control? Well, to start with, standard costs are simply predetermined standard cost with regard to direct material, labor, and factory overhead. Okay, now how do you arrive at a standard cost? Okay, well, generally this is based upon a manager's best judgment. That is, someone who has experience with this type of operation to identify what types of costs are going to be there and what are the level of those costs. Now, based upon this experience, the use of historical data and things like that to apply to the situation, you come up with what you believe will be the likely need or necessity for a particular asset or resource that drives the cost. That is, how much of a particular activity driver will be present, okay, or necessary for efficient and effective operations. Now, that activity driver is what you will ascribe the cost to. So you will say, okay, you have this much of the activity driver and you assign this predetermined or standard cost for that amount of that. Now, this is generally used in a process-based costing system where you're assigning cost along a particular process that's carried out in the organization. And the primary function is that it's used in comparison to. It is used as a metric to compare to the actual costs that are incurred. Because once again, this is projection. You are budgeting and saying this is what you believe the cost will amount to. Okay? But ultimately, you will not know the actual cost until the process or project is carried out. So with that being said, you'll later compare the actual cost with the standard cost to see, once again, how it performed. So in setting standards for your cost, right, there's a logical approach to it. So managers have a lot of leeway in carrying this out, but generally it involves establishing your cost centers whereby you collect your individual costs associated with activities. You classify or codify accounts to a particular cost. That is, generally you're going to identify the activity driver that's part of those accounts so that you can attribute cost to that activity. And then you set standards for how much of that cost or how much of that activity driver you will believe will be present. And then you assign cost to that level of activity. And you can do it in three phases. You can say what would be your ideal amount of cost incurred, your attainable amount, or your most basic, that is the bare minimum amount of resource allocated or cost incurred. Okay. So that being said, you have, three standards, basically a high, middle, and low type thing. And from this information, you will then establish a standard system for applying the cost to that particular activity and accounting for it in accordance with your accounting system. So this is where managerial control uses standard costing and applies it to management and analysis of a particular project, activity, or undertaking.